if you have any questions related to nabs in a general sense beyond what's discussed today. And if you have any questions about any of the content that Monique will be presenting this afternoon, feel free to just drop it in the Zoom group chat. I'll document everything and then we can cover all that material at the end. Thanks again. And over to you, Monique.
Super, thanks so much. Just by way of introduction, again, my name is Monique Madan. I'm a certified financial planner, financial management advisor, and chartered financial divorce specialist. And I work in a private practice called U Potential, and I've been working with the nabs community for upwards of 10 years now. So this large-scale panic is not the first time that we've seen this together, and I'm definitely going to try to help you allay some of the stress with regards to your finances in particular. Now again, just by way of giving you a better understanding of where I come from, unlike a lot of financial professionals who focus on investments, my practice and the work I do with nabs really is more geared towards optimizing opportunities and finding and maintaining financial stability. And naturally, we couldn't have thought of a better opportunity for us to share these types of ideas now. For those of you who may have heard my seminars before, you'll know that there's a couple of themes that I often bring up, and this is not going to be any different. I often talk about emergency funding and planning cash flow. For those of you who have not heard those presentations, nabs has been good enough to actually provide links to those. So on the nabs website, you can find a recorded version of 2 seminars, one related to how to prioritize at different stages in your life, whether you're fresh out of school or you're well established in the industry. And then the other involves managing your money and how to know whether or not you are living within your means. Lastly, before we jump in, a matter of housekeeping, if you are going to maintain a visual of myself or the other participants, I would recommend that you put that in the bottom left-hand corner, because that's where no content will be. You can put it, basically, there's an icon you'll see of U Potential, and that would be the best place for it so you don't interrupt the slides. So anyway, I thank you in advance for your attention, and let's jump right in. So my objectives for today, and what I've been asked to talk about, is really how to go through this period of time when there's so much that we can't control, trying to see what we can control, especially with regards to our financial situations. For those of you who are budgeting your time today, you should know that the content of the presentation will probably take about 30 minutes or so, and I've left a lot of time at the end for questions and discussions, so I'll make myself available to answer specific questions. If they're of a more personal nature, of course, I understand, you can contact me directly with those questions as well. Also, just one last thing, the slide deck itself and the discussion around the slide deck will be recorded and available at a later date, but your individual questions, I will stop the recording to protect your privacy. And lastly, nabs and the good folks who work there will be doing a draw at the end of the content of the presentation for a $200 gift card. So you have to stay to the end of the presentation for that. The strategies that we're going to be talking about in particular with regards to stabilizing your financial situation have to do with both federal income supports and then other announcements that have been made that, have been fast and furious every single day. A new announcement by the Prime Minister with reference to how to help people go through this. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to educate you, provide you with links so that you can more easily apply for those programs. So starting off, let's focus on the economy and how the government incentives are intended to help businesses. So first and foremost, I think a lot of this discussion stems from perhaps the bad experience many people had during the Great Recession of 2008 and 9. And during that time, the government was dealing with large-scale layoffs, and the tool of the day was really things like supporting particular industries, so that with large funding. I think in this particular period, what the government is trying instead is how to support employers, be it through payroll subsidies or additional lenience on how they can access lending, so that ultimately those businesses stay afloat, and in turn, they can keep their payrolls and they can keep people working. Keeping people working and spending is really what the government is trying to do, because when people start to hoard and look at austerity measures, you see an economy imploding, and that's what could turn a blip into a recession or ultimately even into a long-standing depression. What's incredibly important for your industry, of course, is that marketing is a leading indicator. You're the first, unfortunately, the first industry to be laid off often and the last one to come back. So the more protections can be put in place for employers, the more jobs can be saved in that realm. Okay, so that's with regards to employers. Now, we think of the larger employers as those that can access these benefits, but that's simply not true. Even smaller businesses, those that are classified as having payrolls of between, let's say, $50,000 a year and $1 million a year, do have an option, which is the Canada Emergency Business Account, CEBA. And what that is increased opportunities to access interest-free loans on a temporary basis, again, to help promote. I doubt it has much to do with inventories, because a lot of inventory exchanges are really shut down right now, but probably having more to do with payroll support. The goal of this program then is to create the funding so that people will stay employed. And the really neat thing about this program is if it is repaid within a deadline, which is the end of 2022, up to 25% of the loan could be forgiven. And that's pretty amazing. If you're going to be accessing $40,000 in interest-free loans and you do bounce back and are able to repay it, essentially you only have to repay $30,000 of it. You'll get a refund of the $10,000 it's forgiven. Now, for those who need a little bit longer to rebound, the loan, if it does persist after December 31st, 2022, can be converted to a fairly low interest rate loan for 3 years. 5%, just so you know, is not a bad lending rate for smaller businesses. So it really does continue to provide some benefit for smaller businesses. Okay, so now, let's not worry too much about the businesses for a second. Let's focus on you. So one of the points that we've been shouting off the rooftops for years and years and years and have been difficult to listen to, of course, is that Canadians are over-borrowed. We're over-leveraged, and that really makes an issue like we're facing today all the more harder to endure. So any layoffs that happen in the economy will threaten the over-borrowed households. So there's actually 6 key incentives that the government has announced basically as of even this morning, to make sure that people are staying working, continue to buy, continue to support the economy around them. The reason why many of these programs are changing so frequently, of course, is that the government's being lobbied by both industry and other lobbyists who are relaying those really important needs, whether it's income support or other programs that you'll see. And so that's why it's been so very hard to keep up with everything. Now, all of the programs that are listed on this slide, I have links to at the end of the presentation too. So you can go directly and find more information about it. So There is the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which most people at this point have heard about, although I can't honestly say that there's a ton of clarity on just yet. Some of you may even have applied for this already. There will be an increase in the GST rebate for those of you who receive that quarterly payment. For those with children, the Canada Child Benefit will be increasing as well to support parents who are staying at home. Employment insurance isn't actually increasing so much as there's some lenience being offered there, and then some opportunities for people who are in debt and perhaps have taxes owing, some deadline changes and some relief measures there. Now, it may be tempting for you to apply for all of these, but I'll show you that there are some situations where you may not want to take advantage of some of these opportunities, so listen closely. So let's start firstly with the CERB, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. The question I get asked most often is, how do I know whether to navigate EI or the CERB? And the litmus test really is, have you been laid off? If you've been laid off, you go the way of employment insurance. If you have not been laid off, but you're not earning, you go the way of the CERB. And actually, I'm pretty impressed. The government actually has taken that option off of the table right now. Both programs are being served by the same website. So when you answer the questions, they will naturally navigate you to the right program. So you don't have to worry that you are leaving helpful monies on the table. You won't. Anyway, to clarify, and there was a question that was sent in, the self-employed will be eligible for the CERB, because of course we know that self-employed persons, with the exception of perhaps funding their own maternity leave, can't participate in employment insurance. So the people who are going to enjoy the CERB are the self-employed, those who are, let's say, not eligible for any sort of a paid leave or haven't got the opportunity to work from home. Anyone, of course, who's sick or quarantined and their caregivers, and parents who are home as a result of having to take care of children who either don't have school or their daycare centers are closed. Now, the benefit amount has been referred to in two different ways. It's either referred to as $2,000 every 4 weeks or $500 per week. It's all the same, but anyway, that relief will be available between March 15th and October 3rd. Whether or not it's extended, only time will tell. Okay, so for those who've already applied to the CERB, what I hear from most people is that it's a fairly easy process, thank goodness. We hear south of the border that applying for their employment insurance is very, very difficult. So this has been significantly easier from what I understand. As a best practice, the best way to apply for this program would be if you have a direct deposit account already with the Canada Revenue Agency. That will shorten the period of time that you have to wait for the benefits. So I think that's worthwhile, spending a few minutes and creating that direct deposit. Otherwise, the eligibility requirements are pretty loose. Really, you have to be over 15 years old, which will exclude many high school students, but will include many university students who will have difficulty finding work this year. You have to have earned $5,000 in employment or self-employment income last year for the 2019 tax year. And you have to be expecting that you are not going to have income for 14 consecutive days starting that earliest day, I think, which was the 15th of March. And that would, let's say, in the first 4 weeks of this crisis, you were expecting to have no income during that period. The next program that's going to be sort of the most direct payment to people's pockets will be a direct payment opportunity through the GST rebate. So for those of you who collect this, typically those who are of more modest income, the payment for May will be doubled. So the average benefit for an individual might be in the order of $400, which would be what you would have received, let's say, over the course of a full year. You'll receive it in one lump sum in May, or $600 for a couple. What's really helpful, I think, with this program is that you don't actually have to do anything. If you are eligible for the GST rebate, it will show up in your bank account. You don't need to do anything. Now, with regards to the GST rebate, it's really important that you stay up to date with your taxes, because the GST rebate is determined to some degree by your filing of your 2019 income. So this might be a situation where you don't take advantage of an opportunity we'll talk about later on. For parents, the Canada Child Benefit, which is a monthly stipend that we get, it used to be to help cover daycare costs, but it's really very general now. That will also be increased by $300 per child, starting with the May payment. Again, no application is necessary, which is really, really helpful, but it's really important that you make sure that your taxes are up to date. And you know, this might be a great opportunity to spend some time sorting through and making sure that you are up to date with your taxes. Just a little bit of information with reference to employment insurance. Many people are already either aware of EI because they've taken advantage of it before, or because they've gone on a maternity leave or a parental leave. But EI really is for those who have officially been laid off, those who are diagnosed with an acute illness, or their caregivers. So let's delve a little bit into employment insurance. So for those who have been laid off, they also must have paid into the program. So again, not those in cash type businesses or self-employed persons. And they also have to have accumulated a certain amount of insurable hours. And that varies widely both by industry and by geographic locations. So I have a link there for you to double check whether you've satisfied this if you are put in this situation. EI will pay up to 55% of your income, or $573 per week, whichever is lower, translating into about $2,200, $2,300 per month. There is a waiting period, and to acknowledge that waiting period, most people are being directed to the CERB first, and then you would be eligible for EI if this is a new application. If you're already on employment insurance, my understanding is that you would continue with your EI benefit because, frankly, it's more generous anyway. And again, EI is payable for periods of time between 14 and 45 weeks, depending on, again, industry and geographic locations. So, you know, before this crisis happened, anyone listening who is in the prairies, specifically Alberta, there were much more generous offerings in Alberta because of the devastation that was happening related to the oil industry. As I mentioned earlier, everyone, EI, CERB, whatever you're applying for is now being processed through the CERB website, which again, I have a link to at the end, so you will not be sent to the wrong place. For those of you who are working, but your work has been reduced because of illness of any sort, then you would still be eligible perhaps for employment insurance. And to know whether or not you're eligible would be to be able to prove that your income has dropped by at least 40%. So you've gone to part-time work because of illness or something like that. This is very often the case for those who may be required to go on dialysis or other therapies. Again, there's a need for you to have paid into the program and achieved a certain level of insurable hours. And it's only paid, because it's really geared for acute illness, it's only paid for about 15 weeks. What I think is really important about this program now is that formerly, to get on EI, the sickness benefit used to take a long time because you had to provide medical certificates and all sorts of application supports. And now you can actually waive the need for any sort of medical certificate, and you can also waive the waiting period. There used to be a 2-week waiting period. You can waive that too. I've given you the phone number for that. Now, don't think that eventually people won't be asked for supporting documentation. So this is not obviously something that the government wants people to take advantage of if they're not eligible, but I think most people will only apply for this if they really need it. And lastly, and I think this is a really interesting piece that I hadn't spent a lot of time on before preparing for this seminar, is the caregiver benefit, which again could be as little as 15 weeks and up to 35 weeks. The interesting piece about the caregiver benefit is it's for those who are providing care for the ill, needing end-of-life care and things like that, but it's not limited to people who are family members. So there's a caveat that's really neat, where if the family considers you like family, so this could be, long-standing caregivers for the elderly and things like that, there really is a broader definition of who can participate in this program, and I think it really does help people have people around them when they're ill. Now, this continues to require medical verification that the person who's has left work to take care of somebody, and it also requires some sort of an attestation from the family members that you really are someone that they see as like a family member. But if you qualify under those two things, again, you could be eligible for employment insurance, which again could be very, very helpful during these trying times. Now again, both the caregiver benefit and the sickness benefit, you're going to go through the EI portal, and if you're better off with the CERB, they will direct you to that. And just to make sure you're not making at least a knowledgeable decision on this, NABS has put up this very, very cool infographic that helps you navigate where you should be. So really based on your answers to certain questions, are you self-employed? Are you a contractor who contributes to EI? It'll send you to the right direction and ultimately to the right information. Again, it's on the NABS website, and I'll have a link to it later on. Okay, so whether you're employed, you're self-employed, you find yourself without a job, let's look at things that across the board we can all participate in and make things a little bit easier for you. Now, what's interesting, I've been in the industry for a bit, and I've never seen a period of time where the government has encouraged lenders to help those who have borrowed from them. And specifically, and I talk about this a lot in my seminars, credit card companies have never passed on interest rate lenience to their clients. And now what you're seeing is on a case-by-case basis, you can actually contact your credit card company and potentially have them either defer payments or offer you other lenience measures. And this is really, I think, a great testament to how we're all trying to make things better and ultimately try to support the economy. Because if we stop spending, if we stop, going out to eat with those limited contact measures or having that food being brought into us, so there's such a terrible and devastating ripple effect that we want to prevent. So in general, both banks and credit card companies are being encouraged by the government to help with more creative and lenient measures. For those who have student loans that are still structured under the Canada Student Loan Program, so not through banks directly, but through the Canada Student Loans Program, or those who have a mortgage that's insured under the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, they have already very publicly announced that they are going to be offering 6-month payment deferrals. So that is really going to help people keep other parts of the economy going. You should also know that there are some deferral opportunities for both property taxes and utilities. Now that would be on the municipal level. So there's, you'd have to look at your own municipality to see how you would apply for those. And I would imagine, again, it would be on a case-by-case basis. This can be incredibly welcome for those who have limited income for the next little while, but don't want to have uncertainty. And as we go through this pandemic together, we'll come to recognize, how long these measures will be in effect. Now, how do you decide whether you will apply for some of these benefits? I think the question to ask really is, do I have enough cash to last me 3 to 6 months worth of expenses? And this is again where I become a little bit of a broken record. If you've heard me before, I talk incessantly about the need for an emergency reserve. I'm not going to talk about that now because there's no point in penalizing people who may not have it, but this might be a great question to ask to determine whether or not you should apply for some of those services. So if you have enough cash to last you 3 to 6 months, then I would suggest that you continue with your debt payment obligations and maybe reassess in a month or two, because inevitably at some point, some of those bills will come due. So if you have enough to float you, you might as well make things easier for yourself by spreading those payments over a longer period of time. But if you don't, and many people don't, then I would absolutely contact your lenders, contact your landlord, contact your municipality, and find out what you can negotiate, because the priority has to be that you have enough for your household's needs and stability at this time. You want to stay in your home. You want to be able to put food in your stomach. You need to have a roof over your head and provide for your family. The next sort of global offering is relief for tax reporting. So as many of you will know, the tax deadline is typically April 30th. The deadline is being extended to June 1st to give people more time. And actually, kind of neat, it looks like CRA is coming into the 21st century, and they're going to start allowing electronic signatures. So that's going to be a real benefit too. For those of you who will have taxes owing, the deadline usually coincides with when you report your taxes. They're actually going to allow you to defer paying until September 1st. Again, always with an attempt to keep more money in your pocket so you can support the economy. Again, so you might ask the question, what do I do? Do I take advantage of some of these deferrals, or shall I go ahead and file on time? What I would suggest is that if you want to participate specifically in the Enhanced Canada Child Benefit or the Enhanced GST payment, you need to file your taxes on time, because those two will be triggered based on your income from 2019. Similarly, if you're expecting a tax refund, better the money in your pocket. So absolutely, absolutely, if you can, file by April 30th. One thing that I often counsel people on is, even if you're not confident if the information you're submitting on April 30th is correct, better to submit the tax return than to hold back in the hopes of submitting a perfect tax return later on. You can always file what's called a T1 adjustment form and correct any issues. But if they need to have that information in order to be able to assess your eligibility for some of these programs, please, please, please file by that deadline. Again, always in an effort to continue whatever resources you're eligible for. Let's keep them in your hands. So as I promised, I've included a lot of information here, and we will have, I hope, live links to all this. So there's information on the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, on the HST and Canada Child Benefit eligibility, so you can determine whether you're eligible for those. More information on EI, and if you're choosing between the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and employment insurance, again, there's that flow chart, so you'll know which of those tactics to work through. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, they're all being funneled through the same website, so you'll be sent to the right place. additional information on debt management through the Canada Bankers Association. If you do need to suspend your student loan or get some lenience from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, there's lots of information available on those links. If you happen to be a renter, don't be shy about talking to your landlord about perhaps deferring rent. Again, if you have the money, rather than compounding a problem for later, you might as well continue to pay because they're a small business too in large part. But I've given you some resources as to how to make that distinction. And ultimately, what we've been talking about is a lot of the federal supports. Each of the provinces will have nuances based on the prevalency of the virus, the prevalency of unemployment, and all sorts of things. So the link that I'm giving you there will also subdivide into each of the provinces' support and opportunities. So at this point, if it's all right, I'm going to stop the recording and take questions. So one moment, just allow me, I'll bring Mark back on the phone if there are any questions, and I will stop